Back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by my XO, the guy that loved the turtle from the last episode, Christoph.
Hey
Hey, buddy.
everybody. Oh man. You were so right about the turtle. I was anticipating it for weeks and you delivered. It was fantastic.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. So now we're going to get back into the American Revolution. We got one more thing for the New York that I thought we'd talk about. I thought since it has boats in it, we'll talk about the Delaware River crossing.
Oh yeah, yeah. That sounds good.
Well, it's not technically naval. It does have boats.
Yes.
All
I'll
right.
allow it.
Oh, you'll allow it. Thanks. I
Hey,
appreciate that.
we need to have an arbiter of what's interesting and what's not. And hey, that's me.
That's you. Okay. Well, are you ready to get underway?
Oh, yes, sir.
All right. So, 1776 started very well for the Americans, with the evacuation of the British troops from Boston in March, and the defense of New York City had gone quite poorly. So, British General William Howe had landed troops on Long Island in August and had pushed George Washington's army just right out of New York by mid-November. And then he captured the remaining troops on Manhattan. Howe then sent troops under the command of Charles Cornwallis across the Hudson River into New Jersey and chased Washington across New Jersey. Washington's army was also shrinking because of the expiring enlistments. Remember when we talked about that?
I do.
But there's also desertions as well. You know, morale goes down, people just run away.
And if I recall at this time, a lot of people deserted and went to the other side, right? Like they were being recruited by the British. It's like, hey, yeah, we'll take care of you. We'll feed you. Just come on over.
Yeah, some of them did do that. So most of Washington's army crossed the Delaware River into Pennsylvania north of Trenton, which is in New Jersey, and destroyed or moved to the west shore all of the boats for a number of miles in all directions. So Cornwallis, rather than trying to chase Washington further, just established a chain of outposts from New Brunswick to Burlington.
Wow.
The one in Bordentown in Trenton is where he ordered his troops to their winter quarters. That's where they're going to winter for the winter.
Oh yes, that's before central heat was a thing.
Yeah. Miserable. So Washington camped his army near McConney's Ferry, which is really not far from the famous crossing site. Washington himself first took his quarters across the river from Trenton, probably to try to keep an eye on Cornwallis.
Oh, definitely.
And then he moved on December 15th to the house of a guy named William Keith, so he could be closer to his own guys.
Nice.
Because you know how Washington was about that stuff. He loved his guys.
Well, I don't know personally, but I have heard many reports, probably second and third hand. He's a good guy.
Yeah. More than likely why he got, elected to become a president.
Unanimously.
Yeah. So when his army first arrived at McConkley's Ferry, he had around between 4,000 to 6,000 men. 1,700 of these guys were not fit for duty because they were hurt.
Oh.
In the retreat that they had to do across New Jersey, they had lost a lot of supplies that they needed, like medical.
Yeah, gosh, this seems like such a dark hour for the Americans.
Well, it was. He also lost contact with two divisions of his army. General Horatio Gates was in the Hudson River Valley, and General Charles Lee was in western New Jersey. And there were about 2,000 men with them.
Dang. That's a huge
Washington
portion of his
had
army, yeah.
Yeah. Washington had ordered both of his generals to join him, but Gates, he was delayed by heavy snowstorms. And Lee, he did not think very good of the general. So he was like, you know, maybe we didn't get the orders and we're just going to stay here on the British flank.
What a
Uh,
knucklehead. That's
yeah,
crazy. That's not how army works.
not supposed to be. But of course, a lot of these guys were civilians just, a month
That's
ago.
true. Not pros, just guys lending a hand while their crops don't need tending to.
Right. And also, there's no professional army, no training at this time. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll cut Gates some slack this time, Dale.
okay. You can do that, but I'm going to say that that was BS.
Oh, no, I agree it was, but like I'll give him a warning. You know what I mean? Just next time though, if it comes up again, we're gonna have trouble. Continue.
Okay. Okay. So, I mentioned earlier that other Washington's other problems was that enlistments were expiring, and this series of lost battles and the retreat from New York had left their morale very, very low. So, many of these guys, including the Second Continental Congress, fled south. A number of these guys were like, I'm not reenlisting. This is BS. I'm done here. And, a lot of them were just like, I'm not even waiting. I'm out. I'm outie. Bye. So Washington issues orders to bring supplies to the camp. And he also orders men to go and recruit new soldiers. And there was a small, slow trickle of guys arriving at the camp to enlist. So he's starting to get some guys back again. Now, militia recruiting also starts having an uptick in New Jersey and Pennsylvania
Man.
because, huh?
Well, I bet. I mean, the enemy's right at their doorstep.
Right. And they were mistreating them. The British and the Hessians were, abusing these residents in New Jersey.
All that does is foment rebellion.
Yeah. Now, morale does have a bit of a boost on December 19 because of a publication of a pamphlet by Thomas Paine. It was entitled The American Crisis. And you might be familiar with the way it started. Quote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in the crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and women. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." You've heard that before.
I have, and that is so well said. And I lament the lack of lyrical writing in our publications today.
Mm-hmm. So once Washington discovers this pamphlet, he orders it to be read to his troops. And, the publication is not food or shelter. It does help improve morale and, makes them a little bit more tolerant of their current conditions.
I think
And
time has
then,
shown that. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, time has shown that their sacrifice is greatly appreciated by the American people, as difficult as it was for them at the time. Their glory is truly great, having stood up to the finest, quote unquote, standing army in the world.
Yeah. And then 5 days later, blankets and other provisions start arriving. So
Oh,
now they're getting a little bit more help.
nice. Man, nothing beats a blanket on a cold day. Gosh,
Oh, yeah.
what a relief.
On December 20th, there was another morale booster. That is when General Lee's division of 2,000 men arrived. Unfortunately, he was not there, and it was under the command of General John Sullivan because Lee had been captured by the British as
Oh.
he wandered too far outside his troops' perimeter because he was like, I'm a general. I need a roof, a bed, blanket, and a nightcap.
Those are the perks of being a general, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
Mm-hmm. So soon after that, another 1,000 militiamen from Philadelphia under a guy named Colonel John Cadwalder joins Washington. And as a result of all these reinforcements and a small number of volunteers from the local area, Washington's troops now numbered around 6,000
Whoa. That is
for
significant.
duty. Yes. So he split these guys up a number of different ways. One group was set to guard the ferries at Bristol and New Hope. Another group was placed to protect supplies at Newtown, Pennsylvania, and to guard the sick and wounded who would have to remain behind when, they crossed the river. So this left him about 2,400 men to take into battle. So now Washington's like, I need to plan. And he had been considering some sort of a bold move because he had to fix his little retreating reputation.
Yeah. That kind of reputation haunts you in the military and history books, so I could definitely see his motivation.
Yeah. And once his reinforcements get there, he's like, ooh, now I get to do something. So he first considers an attack on the southernmost British positions near Mount Holly, where there was a militia force. He sent a guy named Joseph Reed to meet with another guy named Samuel Griffin, who was the militia commander. Reed, he gets there to Mount Holly on the 22nd, and he finds Griffin sick and his men in pretty poor condition. But their morale was higher than their condition because they were willing to be a diversion.
Wow. As someone who has been sick before in the past, that is incredible, especially given the lack of corner store pharmacies at the time. Incredible.
This diversion was the Battle of Ironworks Hill. This happened the next day, and it drew the Haitians at Bordertown far enough south that they would not be able to help the Trenton garrison. Now, Reed also gathered intelligence, and this led Washington to abandon the idea of attacking Mount Holly and instead to target the Trenton garrison.
Whoa.
So he announced his decision to his staff, saying that the attack would take place just before daybreak on December 26th. So Washington's final plan was for 3 crossings. He was going to cross with his troops and the largest group of guys and lead the attack on Trenton. A second group under Lieutenant Colonel John Caldwalder was to cross at Dunk's Ferry near Bristol in Pennsylvania to create a diversion to the south. And a third group under Brigadier General James Ewing was to cross at Trenton Ferry and hold the bridge across the Assunpink Creek, which is just south of Trenton, to try to keep the enemy from escaping that way. Once Trenton was to be secured, the combined army would move against the British posts in Princeton and New Brunswick, and then a fourth crossing would happen by men provided by General Israel Putnam to help out Cadwalader. But this fourth crossing was nixed when Putnam said that, you know what, all my guys are sick. We can't do it.
I appreciate him looking out for his guys and then noting how
Yeah.
ineffective they would be.
Yeah. So they started their preparations on December 23rd. So on Christmas Eve, the boats used to bring the army across from the Delaware from New Jersey were brought down from Malta Island near New Hope, and they were hidden behind the Taylor Island at McConkey's Ferry. This was Washington's planned crossing site. And so security was tightened around there. So then Washington makes a final meeting to solidify all the plans with all of his officers. And orders were issued by Washington on December 25th, Christmas Day, outlining plans for the operation. So let's talk about the watercraft
Yes.
that they used,
Let's
the
do.
boats. So there were actually a wide variety of these things. They were primarily gathered by the militiamen from the surrounding counties in New Jersey and Pennsylvania with the help of the Pennsylvania Navy.
Pennsylvania
They
Navy.
had- Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I keep forgetting that as colonies and states or colonies, they had their own independent infrastructure of all kinds, currency, all that. So that it shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah. Yes, everybody had a navy. At least all the coastal guys had their own navy. Colonies had their own navies and their own armies and everything like that. But they had some large ferry vessels, which were big enough to carry large coaches. And more than likely, these are the ones that they used to bring over the horses and artillery. They had a large number of Durham boats that were used to transport the soldiers across the river. You would recognize these as one of the boats from the famous painting of
The rowboats.
Washington.
And him standing in a boat. That you never do that, man.
Yeah, he did.
Well, I never do that. I don't have the balance of George Washington. Let me just say that.
No, you don't. These boats were designed to carry heavy loads from Durham Iron Works. They had high sides and a shallow draft, and they were poled across the river. These boats were sailed or operated by experienced watermen. The most prominent of these guys was a guy named John Glover, his Marblehead Regiment. These guys were from Marblehead, Massachusetts. So they were joined by experienced seamen, dockworkers, and shipbuilders from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And local ferry operators who, knew the river very well.
I was going to say, local knowledge of waterways is invaluable.
Yeah. So on the morning of Christmas Day, Washington orders his army to prepare 3 days' food and issues orders that every soldier be outfitted with fresh flints for their muskets. He's like, no wet muskets here.
No. This is not the time to have material failure.
No. He was worried by intelligence reports that the British were planning their own crossing once the Delaware was frozen over.
Oh.
So at 1600, Washington's army turned out for its evening parade, where they were issued ammunition, and even the officers and musicians were ordered to carry muskets. They were told that they were departing on a secret mission. So they lined up and marched 8 abreast in their formations, and they had to be as quiet as they possibly could be. Don't make a noise.
I've heard that fresh snowfall absorbs sound exceptionally well, so that probably played to their advantage, I would assume. That's why it's always super quiet when it has just snowed, because the regular sounds you would hear just kind of get absorbed by those layers of air between everything. Anyway, still,
Well,
be quiet.
I don't know. I have never really lived in a place very long that had snow.
To your credit, sir, snow is sure. It's fun at first. You want to keep the relationship professional. It's like, come on
Yes.
over, we'll have fun. Okay, but then you need to leave, and then we're good.
Tell you what, if the retired XO from the podcast would like to inform us of fresh snow, whether it would be a good silence dampener or not, Stephen, please let us know.
Yes, chime in. We need your expertise.
Our northern friend. So they leave the camp at the ferry, and Washington's plan required the crossing to begin as soon as it was dark enough that they would not be seen from the other side of the river. Most of his troops, though, did not reach where they were going to cross until about 2 hours later, 1800,
Okay.
which was about 90 minutes after sunset.
And they had to be quiet and stealthy, so I imagine it would have been very difficult.
Yeah. Plus, they got all these pots and pans on their hips that clank around, so they had to.
Coin purses full, jingling.
So the weather on the march got worse and worse and worse. It turned from a drizzle to a rain to sleet and then snow.
Wow.
One soldier said, quote, "It blew like a hurricane." Now, Washington, he had given the logistics crossing to his chief of artillery, a guy named Henry Knox, who was described to be a portly gentleman. So he was probably warm.
Well, that's an advantage, yes.
Yes. So he was in charge of crossing a large number of troops. And in this day and age, most of them can't swim. He also had to safely transport 18 pieces of artillery.
Whoa.
With their horses all over or across the river.
That is an element that is not captured in that beautiful painting, let me tell you.
No. Knox wrote that the crossing was accomplished with almost infinite difficulty. And that its most significant and that its most significant danger was floating ice in the river. Icebergs.
Yes. Probably not as big in a river, but still dangerous.
No, not as big as in a river, but yeah, flowing river, flowing icebergs.
Yeah, throwing giant shards of ice at you with huge mass, that could be a problem.
At a wooden boat.
That's a problem.
Yeah. One observer noted that the whole operation might have failed, but for the lungs of Colonel Knox.
Shouting does have a place, and I can see that place being on the Delaware River in that cold snowstorm.
Watch the horses! Watch out! No, don't pull that rope, you dummy! So, Washington was among the first of the troops to cross the river, going with the Virginia troops led by a guy named General Adam Stephen. These troops formed a sentry line around the landing area in New Jersey with the strict instructions that no one was to pass through. Now, you remember from the famous World War II movie where there was, passwords flash with the response bang?
Yes.
There was a password here as well. Can you guess what it was?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put myself in a revolutionary mindset. I'm guessing it was...
Well, put your wig on.
Oh, okay. So, got to get those curls just right. I'm guessing it was probably something complicated, like haberdashery. And you know what? I can only think of half of it. Haberdashery is probably it, though. I'm 95% sure.
Victory or death.
That's not as complex as I thought. I'm a little disappointed, colonial guys.
But,
But it does drive the point home. I mean, that is why they're there. All right. I'll give them a pass, too, this time.
So the rest of the army crossed without significant incidences. Only a couple guys fell into the water.
Hey.
Including the guy named Colonel John Haslett.
Did he make it out of the water?
Yes.
Okay. I was worried. I was thinking the worst thing that could happen is falling into the freezing river. It's not frozen. It is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oof.
All right. So, because of the amount of ice on the river, the artillery did not finish crossing until about 0300.
Ooh.
Which means that nobody was ready to march until 0400 because they're not going to advance without their artillery.
Yep, that's about right.
Now, remember, there are also 2 other crossings going on as well. And these crossings didn't go as smooth.
That's right.
There were some ice jams on the river, which stopped General Ewing from even attempting a crossing below Trenton. And Caldwalder crossed a significant portion of his men, but then he found that he could not get his artillery across the river. So he's like, okay, guys, just come back. Yeah. We're not going that way without our artillery. So he sat the battle out.
Wow. Okay.
He did not.
Well, no, better safe than sorry for sure in that case, because you'd be sending their men to their doom, and you might as well just save them for a later date.
Yeah. So when he received word that Washington won, he crossed again. And then he retreated again when he found out that Washington had not stayed there.
Oh.
Don't bother trying to go find him and go chase after him, to rejoin with him. Just retreat, I guess. All right. So back to Washington. As soon as everybody was gathered up and they were ready, he ordered his men to split into 2 columns. He gave the command of one column to General Sullivan, and he commanded the other one himself. Sullivan's column was to take the river road from Bear Tavern to Trenton, while Washington's column would follow the Pennington Road, which was a parallel route a few miles inland from the river. So the battle happens, people fight, people die, people are captured. 3 Americans were killed, actually, and 6 were wounded, while 22 Hessians are killed, with 98 wounded.
Wow.
Big disparity. Washington's plan worked.
Nice.
and the Americans captured 1,000 prisoners.
That's huge. How does
Yeah,
one wrangle 1,000 prisoners?
very carefully.
Yeah, I would imagine, yes. I should have expected that answer from you. My goodness.
Now, once you thoroughly defeat somebody and you have weapons and they don't, they're like,
Oh, yeah.
they're more docile. All right.
So while you were,
So,
as I was listening to your description of events and Bear Tavern, I thought, oh, I wonder if that bar is still open. And then I found out it is not a bar, but a township. So, but the township is still there, in case you want to visit. It's right by the Washington Crossing Monument in Jersey.
all right. So after the battle, Washington, he had to execute a second crossing. And this was actually more difficult than the first one. After the battle, the Hessian supplies had been plundered, and in spite of Washington's orders for its destruction, casks of captured rum were opened. So a lot of these guys got drunk.
Hey, it's cold, man. What do you expect?
The alcohol does not help with the cold.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. So because of the drinking, this probably contributed to the larger numbers of troops that had to be pulled from the waters when they crossed back over.
Oh, man. Winter River crossing plus rum plus inability to swim equals bad outcome.
Yeah. But of course, there's also 1,000 prisoners now. So they had to transport these guys while keeping them under guard across the river as well.
That is more complicated, yes.
So that brings us to the third crossing.
Oh my gosh, this guy and his crossings.
So there was a war council on December 27th, and Washington learned that all of the British and Hessian forces had withdrawn to Princeton, which is very far north. This is what Cadwalader had learned when his militia company crossed the river that morning. So he proposed that the British could be driven entirely from the area, magnifying the victory, making that victory even better.
Wow, cool.
So a lot of talk happened. The council decided that they were going to cross a third time on the 29th. So because this involved most of the army, 8 crossing points were used. And some of them had ice frozen 2 to 3 inches thick, which means it is now capable of being crossed on foot.
As long as you don't march. It's a bad outcome, let me tell you.
Right. So other areas, the crossing was, the conditions were so bad that they were like, we're not doing this today. Let's wait. So it took until New Year's Eve before the army pretty much had all of its supplies in New Jersey.
Well, at least they got him there. That's a long time, but better safe than sorry. And I'm sure the British were having difficulty traversing terrain as well at this point. It's not like the snow only impacted the Americans.
Right. Now, there was another thing that happened that made it even worse, even harder, I mean, that the regiment under John Glover, their enlistments were expiring at the end of the year. A lot of these guys wanted to go home and start privateering.
Really?
Because it was much, much more lucrative.
Oh, yes.
So Congress had to offer a large bounty to be paid immediately to get a significant number of these guys to stay with the army for 6 more weeks.
Excellent. I mean, It's a law of supply and demand in action.
So that will bring us to, the legacy of this whole thing. There was a significant number of people that played important roles in America that were with Washington. These people included the future President James Monroe, future Chief of Justice John Marshall and Alexander Hamilton, and Arthur St. Clair.
Not as familiar with that name.
He served as president of the Continental Congress and governor of the Northwest Territory.
Wow. Okay. Very impressive.
So both sides of the Delaware River where the crossing took place have been preserved. This area is designated as the Washington's Crossing National Historic Landmark. In this district, Washington Crossing Historic Park in Washington Crossing and Pennsylvania preserves the area in Pennsylvania, and Washington Crossing State Park marks the New Jersey side.
Cool.
These two areas are connected by the Washington Crossing Bridge.
Oh, much easier to cross
So you don't
now.
So you don't have to cross by boat anymore.
But you can, right? I mean, they don't disallow it.
Yeah. So that picture that we mentioned at the top, this was made in 1851 by the artist Emanuel Leutz. This is an idealized and historically inaccurate portrayal of the crossing. There are also fictional portrayals in film of this crossing, with the most notable one probably being The Crossing, which was a 2000 television movie starring Jeff Daniels.
Nice. I do like Jeff Daniels.
So that is the crossing of the Delaware River.
Cool. We did it, everybody.
Yeah. I didn't expect that to be the entire episode, but you know what? It is what it is.
You want to end on a high note, and I think capturing 1,000 Hessians usually is pretty good.
All right. So in partnership with HeroCards.us, we honor one of our fallen angels at the end of every episode. So today we are going to honor Lieutenant Gordon Bruce Wolfe. His hometown was Wichita, Kansas. Served in the U.S. Navy. Got to say that now that we're covering heroes from other branches. His unit was the Training Air Wing 5, Training Squadron 6. And his date of sacrifice was February 23rd, 1990, near Summersdale, Alabama. He was 29 years old. This was not during a time of war. As a young boy, Bruce Wolfe loved to hunt the open fields of Kansas with his father and younger brother. His brother Lincoln recalls that Bruce was always, without exception, the first to rise, having oftentimes packed the car and loaded the dogs in the darkness of the early morning before Dad or I had even gotten dressed. Bruce graduated from Wichita's South High School in 1978, where he was one of the Titans swim team. He then attended Wichita State University as a biology student with the goal of becoming a doctor. At WSU, Wolfe fell in love twice. There he met Julie Bauer, also from Wichita, and the two would marry in 1984 and later have two daughters, Emma and Hannah. During those college years, Wolfe also began parachuting out of airplanes and fell in love with flying. So much so that he dropped his plans to become a doctor and joined the United States Navy as an aviation officer candidate. 6 months before he graduated from college in 1983. Wolfe earned his pilot's wings in 1985 and served 3 years at Naval Air Station Brunswick, Maine, assigned to Patrol Squadron 23, which was VP-23, patrolling the coast of the North Atlantic. The VP-23 Seahawks were part of a long tradition of maritime patrol aviation. Pilots and crew who flew out of Brunswick protected America's east coast from enemy submarines during World War II. They also flew in the Vietnam War and in the Cold War. And between conflicts, quote, often in harm's way and usually out of the limelight, according to the Brunswick Naval Aviation Museum. At Brunswick, Lieutenant Wolfe became a mission wing commander for the P-3C Orion, which was long-range anti-submarine warfare patrol aircraft. In the summer of 1989, Lieutenant Wolfe transferred to Naval Air Station Whittington Field. In Western Florida's Panhandle region, where he served as a flight instructor. Assigned to Training Air Wing 5, Training Squadron 6, Wolfe trained student pilots in a T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor training aircraft. The T-34 Charlie was a tandem-cocked, low-wing turboprop aircraft used to train Navy and Marine Corps pilots. On February 23, 1990, Lieutenant Wolfe was training Marine pilot First Lieutenant Kerry K. Smith. The two took off from Whittington Field and were flying near Summersdale, Alabama. Smith was practicing a clockwise touch-and-go maneuver. At the same time, another T-34 Charlie training aircraft was in the air, moving counterclockwise to practice emergency landings. The two aircraft paths crossed near the end of the runway and resulted in a mid-air collision. Smith and Wolfe's plane overturned, killing both pilots. The pilots of the other T-34 Charlie were able to land their damaged aircraft and suffered no injuries. Lieutenant Bruce Wolfe was 29 years old. His student pilot, First Lieutenant Kerry K. Smith of Columbia, South Carolina, was 25. When Lieutenant Wolfe was lost, his daughter Emma was just 20 months old. He and his wife Julie were also expecting a second child. Their daughter Hannah was born 6 months later. Lieutenant Wolfe was deployed and not able to be home for Emma's first birthday. In a letter to her, Wolfe wrote, quote, "For now, all I want is to come home and see my girls. I wish you could see the way your mother has loved you these last 6 months. I haven't seen it much at all, but if Grandma Wolfe says it's so, then it's so. I guess she's making up for the love I'd give if I were home." So, Lieutenant Gordon Bruce Wolfe, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Christoph, take
Yes,
us out,
sir.
please.
Okay. Thank you for listening, listeners. It's really, I really enjoy talking to Dale about history and military history in particular. And the fact that you're listening to what we're talking about really is wonderful. So thank you. If you want to get in touch with us, if you noted something that was interesting or a mistake, which I highly doubt, but if you did, feel free to contact us. You can email us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We're also on X Twitter, which is at USNHistoryPod. And then we're on YouTube, and we have a Discord, and those links you can find in the show notes. Yeah, let us know what you think. And if there's any requests that you have or anything, we'll try to work it in. Again, thank you for listening. And if you want to rate us, that would be fantastic, especially if it's 5 stars. So thanks. Back to you, Dale.
It helps other history buffs find us.
Yeah.
So, with that, guys, we're going to wish you fair winds and following sea. Bye, everybody.
Take care.